In today's class, we are going to learn about how strategies can be generated, for which most suitable ones out of alternating strategies can also be selected. Over the past weeks, we've been combing through series of information to understand how strategies can be formulated. In fact, we've tackled a number of issues ranging from an understanding of an organization's mission, vision, and long-term objectives. We've also gone through the way or means through which adequate information can be derived from within and without the organization to equip the strategic managers on the most suitable formulation of a strategy. And the information has become quite all over the place. So the essence of today's lecture is to bring some sort of structure to all that we've done. And that will clarify how an appropriate strategy can be selected for an organization to achieve its objectives. So this is going to be the outline I'll be dealing with. And by the end of the lecture, you should have learned some key issues from these thematic areas. So the core object of today's class is on strategy generation and selection. And as I indicated, we will be coming through some of the things we've done over the past few weeks to bring structure and pattern to whatever we've been doing. So strategy generation and selection has been identified by a number of authorities in the field of strategic management as an important phase in the strategic management process. And this is so because it is the outcome of the strategy generation and selection that can help the organization put its strategy into action and thereafter verify whether they are on the right path towards the attainment of their long-term objectives. And it typically involves the creation of potential strategies. So numerous strategies are unbundled on the strategic decision-making table. And after a thorough comparison and contrasting, as far as their various strengths and weaknesses are concerned, the appropriate one is selected by consensus. So when we say strategy generation, it simply borders on the processes or activities that leads to the development of varied strategic options or strategic choices, out of which an organization can pick the suitable one to pursue towards the attainment of their long-term objectives. Then strategic selection also focuses on the actions or processes that are utilized to assess and pick the most suitable strategic option from the varied ones that will be made available on the strategic table. The process of generating and selecting strategies is actually four-staged. So when we commence the attempt to generate a strategy and eventually select the most suitable one out of the alternative strategies that will be developed, we go through 6 main stages. And the first stage involves an attempt to develop a manageable set of strategic alternatives. So when we say a manageable set of the most attractive alternative strategies must be developed, it simply means that an attempt is made by the key players that have a role to play on the strategic decision-making table to come up with a number of strategies. And the operative word, as far as the first stage is concerned, is that the number of strategies or alternative strategies that will be developed must be manageable. They must be manageable. And what are some of the reasons why it is important for the attractive alternative strategies developed to be manageable? So there, I'm going to talk about some few things which are not in your slides, but I will entreat you, make your own notes or you note them down. The first reason why it is important for the development of attractive but alternative strategies to be manageable is that it helps to grant focus and feasibility for the attainment of the strategy. So it grants focus and feasibility. And what that means is that a manageable set of strategic options ensures that an organization can focus its resources and efforts on thoroughly evaluating and implementing the most promising options. So think about it this way. If we end up developing thousands of strategies on a given strategic table, it will be quite difficult for us to peruse all of them and eventually settle on one. But if we are able to come up with a manageable one, the implication is that it will also help the decision makers to focus their efforts and resources in testing the one that will be more appropriate. So by implication, when we end up considering too many strategies that are overshadowing and taking all our attention and efforts, it will end up diluting the focus of the strategic decision makers and eventually lead to, if you like, paralysis in their analysis. So they will be in a long loop wherein there wouldn't be an end to their settlements on the most appropriate strategy. So it is important for the ones that will be developed to be more manageable. And the interpretation of what constitutes manageable will depend on the time horizon that the organization have at this pedestal. So if they have to make a quicker decision, then research suggests that within 10 options is manageable. The second stage in the process culminating to the generation and selection of strategy is to essentially compare the advantages and disadvantages, if you like, the cost and benefits outcomes of the attractive alternative strategies that have been developed in the first stage. Now, this is also very much important because when we do a cost-benefit analysis of the alternative strategies, it is able to inform decision-making. So by identifying the pros and cons or the trade-offs of the alternative strategies on the table, it provides the decision makers a comprehensive understanding of what each of the strategies entails or what it seeks to do for the organization. And that will empower them to make a judicious decision by selecting the most appropriate one out of the lot. So it essentially helps them to make an informed decision. Another benefit of doing cost-benefit analysis or looking at the pros and cons of the alternative strategies that have been developed in the first stage is that it also helps in the conduct of risk assessments. So by understanding the potential rewards and risk that are associated with each of the strategies developed, it can help the decision makers to also discern the strategies that are worth pursuing and that are not too risky to the organization's well-being. And it shouldn't also be too costly, because at the end of the day, pursuing a strategy that is too costly and eventually eating up into the profit motives of the company wouldn't be a fruitful venture. So it is important to do this cost-benefit analysis or trade-offs of the various strategies in order to do a proper risk assessment. Then the third benefit that we can also derive when we do a thorough evaluation as far as the advantages and disadvantages of the alternative strategies is concerned is that it also helps in the attainment of strategic fits. So what do we mean by the attainment of strategic fits here? That implies that the cost-benefit analysis of the various strategies will ensure that the chosen strategy actually aligns with the overall strategic direction or objectives of the organization. And once this is in sync, then we say there is an alignment or a fit or coherence between the strategy that has been picked and the direction that the company is also heading towards. Then the third stage in the process leading to the generation and selection of strategies also involves an attempt to identify and evaluate alternative strategies by involving a lot of stakeholders, ranging from managers that have a better appreciation or perception of the issues that are going to be considered, and the employees that were hitherto involved in the forgery of the organization's mission and vision statements. Now, this is important because, as we say in our local parlance, say, yenam yenusu kusume fidia, yenam yenusu anekoyi, enam na efidi nibeyi. So if you started the development of your mission, vision, objectives with a category of your stakeholders in the organization, it is right for you to also bring them on board when it becomes ready for the organization to actually evaluate and discern the alternative strategies in order to pick the most suitable one. So the first benefit of this third stage is that it results in the attainment of an inclusive participation by involving those who were part of the crafting of the vision and the formulation of the mission, as well as conducting and assisting in the scan of the internal and external environments. Such people will come onto the strategic table with a better appreciation for their diverse perspectives being sought. And once that is done, it leads to their discernment that there is an inclusive participation, or their voices have been heard. So their level of involvement is noted. Then that also is advantageous to the organization as an entity, because it ensures an alignment and continuity of organizational proceedings. So we are saying that at some point in time, certain individuals were involved in conducting internal and external analysis of the business environments, and others were also involved in the development of the company's mission, vision, and long-term objectives. Why would you want to sideline all these people that commence an instrumental activity in the organization to bring on board fresh individuals that may not even know where the organization is coming from and where they are also heading towards? So once we are able to have the same people sharing their ideas at this point in time, then it will ensure that there is continuity and alignment of organizational proceedings. And the last one, which is very much important, is that it leads to the attainment of commitment and buy-in on the part of the key managers and employees that were involved in it. And this is important because following the formulation of a strategy, it is these key managers, particularly the functional managers, that are going to replicate them and implement them at their varied functional departments. And so what happens is that once they feel they were part of the development of the strategy, it grants them higher level of commitment to ensure that the strategy following its adoption and implementation succeeds. So those are some of the benefits that an organization can derive whenever a lot of stakeholders, including managers and employees, that were involved from the commencement of the strategic process, are also involved in the generation and selection of the strategies. The fourth stage in the process leading to the generation and selection of strategies involves alternative strategies being proposed by participants and requiring it to be considered and discussed in a series of meetings. So the bottom line here is that, as far as the fourth point is concerned, is that it is important to welcome varied opinions from the stakeholders that are going to help in generating the strategies as much as possible. Of course, but it should be manageable. And we're also saying that following the reception of these varied propositions from the participants, they are all expected, the varied propositions are expected to be accorded with the appropriate attention and redress it deserves. And this is supposed to be done in a series of meetings. The reason why this particular 4th point is important is that it leads to the creation of a collaborative environment wherein series of meetings can be held to deliberate and judge on the alternative strategies that have been unbundled on the table. And that sort of environment will create, will always nurture collaboration among individuals that may have diverse viewpoints. And that environment will also provide an opportunity for individuals to understand their opposing, the views of their colleagues that are also being placed on the table, and an opportunity to also understand the angle that they are coming from. Another benefit is that it can also lead to consensus building, in the sense that when meetings are regularly held on an issue, particularly to peruse alternative strategies and understand the most appropriate one, in the end, there is the need for consensus to prevail in order for the most appropriate one to be selected. So by discussing and refining the strategies together as a committee or as a team through varied meetings, the participants can develop a shared understanding and agreement on the most promising option. And that will eventually become the strategic choice appropriate for the organization. So the essence of this series of meetings is to provide each proposer an attempt to convince others to buy into their ideas. And by creating that welcoming and enabling environments, it is able to build consensus out of them. The fifth stage in the process also borders on the degree to which the varied proposed strategies are documented by listing them in writing. So in this day and age, you may not necessarily use pen and paper to write them, but you can also record it and eventually transcribe. Or it can also be typed by the secretary who is checking and minuting the affairs of the meeting. Now, some of the benefits associated with the fifth stage, which borders on writing all the proposed strategies, is that it brings clarity and documentation of the proposed strategy. So by writing the proposed strategies down, it ensures that there's a clarity and a formal record of all the strategic choices that were brought on the table. And this documentation is essential for transparency and accountability's sake. When the committee is questioned on what basis they selected a particular strategic option, that sort of documentation can be presented to whoever is trying to make the inquiry in order for clarity and the thought process of the decision makers to be made known. Another benefit of writing down all proposed strategies is to also ensure that there is a point of reference. A point of reference. And what I mean by this is that a written list of the proposed strategies will allow participants to be periodically referring back to them during the time where they are having discussions and also evaluating them. So they can always refresh their memory by visiting the written proposals on the strategies and be well informed about what is transpiring. Another benefit that can also crop up when proposed strategies are clearly written is that it can serve as an organizational memory. It can serve as an organizational memory. We are all aware that organizations operate with the notion that unless events point to the contrary, it will continue to operate indefinitely. In fact, some scholars prefer to use that organizations aspire to operate in perpetuity. And in this indefinite operational aspiration of organizations, personnel will come and go. So there will be changes in personnel. So when it gets to a point in time in the organizational lifeline, wherein there are different categories of personnel that were not part of the operation from the outset, the organizational memory, which embodies the written of the proposed strategies, will now serve as their frame of reference. So it will ensure that when key personnel or when key personnel are no longer in place, the rationale and philosophy that guided the decision makers on settling on a particular strategic choice can still be made reference to. You can still assess it. And the last one, the final one, as far as the 6 stages of generating and selecting strategies are concerned, is that when all feasible strategies are identified by participants and are understood, the strategies should be ranked in order of attractiveness, or I may rather put it that they should be ranked in order of priority. So why is it important to rank the strategies in order of their attractiveness? The first reason or relevance for ranking them in order of attractiveness is that it helps organization and its players to prioritize. How does prioritization come here? So by ranking the strategies in order of their attractiveness, it will help the key players in the organization to prioritize their options and their activities based on the potential impact that they intend to achieve. It could also, the priority will also help them to know the feasibility of each strategy. So assuming we have 5 strategies and we think the first one, we are 100% sure that it can take us to the promised land. Then in terms of feasibility, that is the one that we need to commit a lot of resources to in an attempt to implement. And that one will also help us align the strategy to our organizational goals. So the prioritization of the various strategies will help the decision makers do a very good job. Another reason why the prioritization of the feasible strategies is important is that it helps to achieve a focused implementation. When the time is right for the strategic option or choice of an organization to be put into use, that wouldn't be the avenue to be experimenting and trying out so many alternatives. So once we are able to identify the most attractive strategy, the organization can now focus its resources and efforts to the implementation of the most promising option. And that is important because that is where the priority of the organization is. So it eventually leads to an increment in the chances of attaining a successful strategy execution. And that will alter well for an organization because it will lead to maximization of return on their investments. Another reason why it is important to rank the strategies according to their order of attractiveness is to help us attain an objective evaluation of the strategic outcomes. So by ranking the strategies involved, an objective evaluation will also be triggered. And in this objective evaluation, you are able to discern the expected benefits that can be obtained from each of these benefits and compare it with the risk or the costs that are also associated with them. So if it turns out that the risk and the cost of some strategies are too high and unbearable, then you need to start thinking twice about those strategies. The strategy formulation and analytical framework. Okay, as I indicated earlier on in my introductory remarks, over the past few weeks, we have gone through a number of information, all bordering on how strategies can be formulated. And if you want to put all those information into their right perspective, ranging from the essence of conducting environmental analysis, be it internal and external analysis, and through the selection of an appropriate strategy to implement, whether you are going the defensive or aggressive strategy, the integration strategies, or what have you. This framework tries to bring a cognitive map to summarize all that has happened so far. So, and the framework is called the Analytical Framework of Strategy Formulation and Generation, which was put forth by David and David. And they contend that this analytical framework can be used to develop and also evaluate varied strategic options for an organization to determine the one that is more suitable out of attractive alternative ones. And typically speaking, the framework consists of 3 major stages, but each stage has a number of activities or nuances that needs to be considered. And the stages include the input stage. So as you can see, the first stage on our screen is the input stage. And the input stage essentially seeks to demonstrate the basic information that are needed to formulate strategies. And this information are usually derived from the external environment and the internal environment. And that is the reason why when we were doing internal assessments and we're trying to peruse some of the competencies and capabilities that an organization must possess in order to strive for the attainment of competitive advantage, we conducted or went through a particular tool known as the internal factor evaluation assessment or matrix. Thereafter, we also learned about external factor evaluation matrix, which borders on the external environment to derive the various factors or forces that are available there that also have the likelihood to impact on organizational success. And if you quite remember, there was even a juxtaposition of the views held by the resource-based view as well as the industrial organizational-based view. So all those will fall within the purview of the input stage. The second stage is also about or labeled as the matching stage, wherein an attempt is made to generate and evaluate strategic alternatives based on the information that was gathered at the first stage, which is the input stage. So having gathered a lot of information at the input stage, how do you make meaning out of it? And how does it inform the sort of strategy an organization should champion? As we learned last week, there are numerous strategies ranging from the integrative strategies through the aggressive to the restructuring strategies and all that. So at what point will you pursue some of these strategies? It is the matching stage that will help you to make meaning out of the information that you derive from the input stage and select the appropriate strategy. Once the matching stage is also exhausted, then the last stage also begins, which is known as the decision stage. So the decision stage is the third stage, which involves a single technique that is utilized to actually pick the most appropriate strategy for implementation. And it is usually accomplished with a tool that we call quantitative strategic planning matrix, QSPM. So we are going to take these specific stages in turn in order to appreciate their nitty-gritties. The first stage, which is the input stage. We are still on the comprehensive strategy formulation framework. And as I indicated earlier on, the first stage is known as the input stage, which involves an attempt made to collect and organize relevant information that are required for a strategy to be formulated. And a number of tools are available for this inputting stage to be thoroughly done. And these tools include external factor evaluation matrix, the EFE, internal factor evaluation matrix, IFE, and competitive profile matrix, CPM. This is not the first time you are hearing these things, but for the benefit of linking them to what we are doing today, I will still explain them. So when we say external factor evaluation matrix, it simply means that we are utilizing a given tool to identify and evaluate an organization's external environment to discern the threats and opportunities that exist out there. And this is important because for an organization to achieve not only competitive advantage, but a sustainable one, there is the need for them to be wary about their threats and, if possible, convert them into their strengths. So by assessing the external environments, an attempt is made to focus on issues such as the prevailing market trends, the nature of competition or competitive rivalry that is available, the activities of consumers, activities of suppliers, government taxation, and all that. So all these external forces are perused using the external factor evaluation matrix. And as we learned, we assign scores to them to see the ones that construe the opportunities for the organization, and the one that also mean a threat, which requires our attention to mitigate it. So the external factor evaluatory matrix provides a clear picture of the external environment of an organization. And some of the key considerations are the ones that I just enumerated. Internal factor evaluation matrix, or IFE, also represents a tool that scans the internal aspect of an organization to assess the company's strengths and weaknesses. So by talking about internal aspect of an organization, we are looking at the resources, both human and non-human, the capabilities of the organization, the culture, the structure, and what have you. And all these are perused through the IFE to determine the organization's internal health. So competitive profile metrics is also a tool that is very much relevant to the inputting stage, where an attempt is made to gather basic information needed to formulate strategy. And what it essentially seeks to do is that it compares a given organization with its key rivals based on a number of critical success factors. And these critical success factors may include the innovation that is being championed by a particular organization. It could also be the distinctive capabilities of the workforce that are found in the organization, the reputable brand that an organization has, which is helping it to retain its customers and all that. So when we compare an organization's critical success factors to that of its competitors, we are able to identify the relative strengths and weaknesses of a given organization as compared to its rivals, and know how well it is doing in the community of practice. So that is it as far as the input stage is concerned. The next stage is the matching stage, which also involves an attempt to generate and evaluate the varied strategic choices that were are being placed on the table based on the information that were generated at the first stage. So what the matching stage does is that it tries to make meaning out of the information that were generated at the first stage and rely on that meaning to pick a most appropriate strategy out of the lots that may be available for consideration. It also employs a number of tools ranging from SWOT analysis, space analysis, BCG analysis, and then IE analysis, and finally, grand strategy matrix. So what I'm trying to say over here is that when we are trying to make sense of the information that have been generated from the stage one, which is the inputting stage, some of the tools that can be used include SWOT analysis. It also includes strategic position and action evaluation matrix, which is also known as space matrix. Then it also includes the use of the Boston Consulting Group matrix, which is also known as the BCG matrix. And it also involves the utilization of the internal-external matrix, which is a measure of the internal factor evaluation metrics and the external factor evaluation metrics. So when you put those matrices together, then you get the IE matrix, and finally the grand strategy matrix. So a brief information about each of these tools that can be used to analyze information generated during the inputting stage. So as we all know, SWOT analysis denotes an attempt to identify the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats facing an organization, or the organization may be facing them. As an analytical tool, SWOT analysis tries to combine insight from the external factor evaluation matrix and internal factor evaluation matrix to identify potential strategies. And this is so because whilst the external factor evaluation matrix will give us the threats and opportunities that exist outside the business environment, the internal factor evaluation matrix will also furnish us with information bordering on the strengths and weaknesses that are found within the confines of an organization. So the SWOT analysis will now derive information from these two continuums. That is the external and the internal factor evaluation matrix, in order to decide on the most appropriate strategic choice for an organizational success. The next tool is the strategic position and action evaluation matrix, which can be abbreviated as the SPACE matrix. So anytime you come across the SPACE matrix, we are essentially talking about an acronym for strategic position and action evaluation matrix. So the SPACE matrix also helps to determine an organization's strategic posture by analyzing the competitors, the competitive position of an organization. So how well the company is faring compared to its rivals. It also considers the financial strengths of the organization. Then it is also interested in the industry stability. How stable or volatile is the industry within which the organization is operating in? And it is also interested in the events that maintain in the external environment of an organization. So when we talk about the SPACE matrix, that is what it encompasses in short. And all these considerations, as far as the SPACE matrix is concerned, is geared towards determining whether the company should pursue an aggressive strategy, a defensive strategy, or a competitive strategy. Another tool is the Boston Consulting Group matrix. And just like the preceding matrices, this Boston Consulting Group matrix also tries to categorize the organization's business units or products into 4 quadrants. And based on some permutations and combinations, each quadrant is given a particular label. And the labeling of each quadrant also informs the sort of strategy the organization should prioritize in initiating suitable outcomes. So very soon we'll be coming back to them to see how they can manifest. Then the 4th one to consider is the IE matrix, which is the internal external evaluation matrix. And the IE matrix strives to position an organization's division or business units on their internal and external opportunities. And this will help the allocation of resources to areas where the organization can quickly make enviable strides. And so beyond resource allocation, it can also help them to make strategic decisions, as in the sort of strategy they need to pursue. And the last tool that can also be championed during the marching stage to make meaning out of the information derived during the inputting stage is the grand strategy matrix, which also strives to evaluate an organization's competitive position and market growth. So the two operative words, as far as grand strategic matrix is concerned, is that it is interested in, one, an organization's competitive position, and two, the industry or the market growth for a given organization. To what extent is the market that the organization is trading in growing? Is the market collapsing or struggling to grow? Or is the market growing excellently? So beyond the second stage, the next stage is the decision stage, which involves the selection of the best strategic option for implementation. And this decision will be informed by the activities that ensued during the first stage, which is the inputting stage, as well as the outcome of the marching stage. So if you don't get the first two stages right, then you are likely to fail or arrive at a particular decision that may not be right for your organization. And there is only one primary tool during the decision stage, and that is also known as the QSPM, which can be fully explained as the quantitative strategic planning matrix. And the quantitative strategic planning matrix strives to help the decision makers to prioritize and select the most attractive strategies by assigning weights or scores the various strategic options. And based on the attractiveness or the weight of each of the scores that are being assigned to the strategies, we are able to decide that a particular strategic option will give us more returns and more success outcomes than others. So that is the quantitative strategic planning matrix. Now we are going to take the various tools that I enumerated under the marching stage in order to illustrate or get a better understanding of them. So the first one that I mentioned was SWOT analysis. I indicated that SWOT analysis is one of the tools that can be used in perusing the information that were generated from the input stage and relying on the outcome of this information to select the most appropriate strategy. SWOT analysis simply borders on the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats matrix, which helps managers to understand their environment appropriately, both internally and externally. So what I'm trying to say is that the SWOT analysis matrix will help managers to develop strategies based on the organization's internal strengths and weaknesses, as well as opportunities and threats that exist externally. If you cross-reference the varied components of the SWOT analysis, that is, if you match them on two-on-two basis, you have an option of unbundling 4 varied strategies, ranging from strengths opportunity strategies, weaknesses opportunity strategies, strengths threat strategies, and weakness threat strategies. And each of these options also suggests a particular strategy that an organization can pursue given their peculiar circumstances. So let's take them in turns. When an organization is pursuing the strengths opportunity strategy, their cardinal objective will be to use their internal strengths to take advantage of their external opportunities. The logic behind it is simple. We are saying an organization is pursuing a strengths matched with opportunities strategy. So what that simply means is that the organization is trying to rely on their strengths, which are found internally, to take an advantage of opportunities that may exist in the external business environment. An example will be when a company decides to leverage on its brand or reputation. So typically, a company with a strong brand, which is actually a strength, can expand into new markets, and this new market will be an opportunity to increase their market share. When this is done, then we are talking about the utilization of strengths opportunity strategies. The second option, as far as the interpolation of these strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats is concerned, also borders on weaknesses, opportunity strategies. Now, the rationale for weaknesses, opportunity strategies is that they are designed to address and mitigate internal weaknesses whilst simultaneously seizing external opportunities. And this may require the company to make investment or change or make some changes to enhance their capabilities. So what weaknesses, opportunity strategies try to do is that it's try to overcome internal weaknesses by taking an advantage of an external opportunity, which means that the incentive to correct your internal weakness is perhaps because of an opportunity that you believe once you are able to contain your weaknesses, you will also be able to seize such an opportunity. And let me give you an example. So a company that is currently experiencing labor shortage, and as we all know, labor shortage is a weakness because it means that you are having fewer hands chasing so many jobs, and you may end up paying a lot of overtime and also putting your workforce through undue stress. Okay, the health and well-being of your workforce will now be at the peril. So when a company is currently experiencing skilled labor shortage, which is a weakness, they can take an advantage of a government initiative to offer training grants to individuals that are interested to upskill themselves in a particular line of profession. So the government may be interested in enhancing the cases of individuals that are ready to go into STEM, wherein they are going to offer free scholarship and free learning environment or resources to whoever will be inclined to do that. So that alone will be an opportunity because the company is not going to pay anything. The only thing they're doing is to offer the workforce that will need this skills upgrade to take an advantage for. So you grant them leave. Part of that, the government is the one that is interested in empowering people's skills. So having a skilled labor shortage, which is a weakness, can be corrected with an opportunity granted by the government to offer training grants to enhance employee skills. So that will be a typical strategy when you are using the weakness opportunity option. Then there is also the strengths threats strategy. Strengths threats strategy. The rationale for strength threat strategy, as far as the SWOT analysis outcome is concerned, is that it focuses on leveraging on internal strengths to protect a given organization from potential threats. You are relying on internal strength of an organization to protect an organization from external threats. You can also say that you are using your internal strengths to counter external threats. I think that would be a much simpler way of explaining it. And an example could be a situation where a company that is facing increased competition. So the increased competition alone is a threat, as we learned under the Porter's generic framework and the Porter's 5 forces model. Competitive rivalry environment alone is a threat that can affect industry profitability. So when a company is facing increased competition, they can use it, they can use their superior production capability, which is a strength, to improve productive quality and differentiate itself among the competitors. And that will be a way of differentiating their products and services from the lot, particularly in that competitive environment. Then the last option, as far as this SWOT analysis matrix is concerned, is the weakness threat strategy. The weakness threat strategy. And the rationale of weaknesses threat strategy is to minimize or mitigate internal weaknesses whilst avoiding external threats. And this may take semblance when a company with high operational costs, which is a weakness, facing economic downturn, which is also a threat. Then the company will streamline its operations to reduce their expenditure and survive in that tougher economic environment. In the same vein, another example of the weaknesses threat strategy may take the form of a situation where a company is lacking market reach. So within the market, they are not very much notable. So when a company is lacking market reach, which is a weakness, and they are also facing an aggressive competition, they can utilize the weakness threat strategy by, for instance, forming an alliance with other rivals that may find themselves in the same soup in order to share resources and improve their market access. So the rationale for the weaknesses strength strategy is to be more defensive and aim at safeguarding the organization from both internal and external threats. And at least the organization should be able to survive until it gets to a point where it has been, we've been able to resuscitate or stabilize it before you can venture into other options. So key strategies, key specific strategies that go along with the weaknesses stress strategy as far as the SWOT analysis matrix is concerned include restructuring or downsizing. In fact, we can conduct some form of redundancy activities or what we learned as retrenchments. So these are further explanations that we can consider as far as the SWOT analysis matrix is concerned. And the options following the pairing of the various components of the SWOT analysis matrix may border on best case scenario, which is the strength opportunity strategies, through most likely case scenario, which includes the weaknesses opportunity strategies as well as the strength threat strategy. And the last case scenario, which is the worst case scenario that one may utilize in order to survive when all other options are not succeeding, is the weakness threat strategy. And this is an outline that can be followed in order to construct the SWOT matrix. It is a stage which you can consider later on. So let's quickly go to the space matrix. The space matrix. And as I indicated earlier on, the space matrix is an acronym, the short form for strategic position and action evaluation matrix. And what it does is that it is composed of 4 main quadrants that seeks to project the nature and temperament of the strategy that can be adopted based on the input information in order to achieve enviable strides for an organization. So these options include aggressive strategies through conservative ones to defensive ones and competitive ones. Now, the 4 quadrants contain labels including financial position, information about the financial position of the organization, the competitive position of the organization, the stability position of the organization, as well as their industry position. And they are construed to be very much important in the determination of the most appropriate strategy to pursue. So the financial position of an organization metric of the space matrix seeks to measure the financial strengths or financial health or well-being of an organization. And some of the key indicators that are used to discern the financial health include the returns that the company is getting on their investments, the quantum of liquidity found in the company, the cash flow, how money is moving into and out of the organization, and their net profit margin. So, typically speaking, financial position of an organization is usually rated using a Likert scale of 1 to 7. So it is rated between the range of +1 to +7, where higher score suggests that the company has a better financial strength. Then the competitive position aspect of the SPACE matrix also seeks to discern the strength that the company has in competing with their rivals. And it is also concerned about the market position of the organization. So some of the key indicators that are used in assessing the competitive position of an organization include the market share that the company is having. So if the market share, if you liken it to that of a pie chart, if the percentage of market share a particular company is having is about 50, then it does suggest that the company is on the verge of enjoying competitive advantage. But the question will be, how can you sustain it? So beyond the market share, another indicator for discerning the competitive position of an organization includes their product quality, the loyalty that is being commanded by customers, the sophisticated nature of technology that they have, their cost efficiency initiatives. So all these will help them to have a better competitive positioning. Now, competitive positioning, as per the SPACE matrix, has an inverse relationship with an organization's fortune, such that, and for that reading, the scoring is done by rating these indicators from -1 to -7. So a lower score, which is the closer you are to -1, suggests that it's an indication that a company has a weaker competitive position. And the closer you are to the -7, then it suggests that your competitive, no, it's rather the opposite. So the closer you are to -1, then it means that your competitive position is strong. And as you proceed towards -7, then your competitive position is weak. Still on the SPACE matrix, another facet of it that can be used to identify the most appropriate strategy is the stability position, how stable the company is as far as the external environment is concerned. So the stability position is used to evaluate how stable the external environment is. And some of the drivers or key indicators for determining the stability position of the external environment include economic stability. How is a given economy doing? The issues about taxation, interest rates, inflation, credit rating, and all that. Anything that borders on economic will fall within the purview of economic stability. But because by extension, the emphasis is on the evaluation of how stable the external environment is, it is equally concerned about some indicators such as technological changes, how technology is changing in the external environment, and to what extent the business is catching up with it, competitive pressures that are existing out there, and the regulatory environments. Typically, the scoring of the stability position of an organization is also inversely proportional to the financial health of the organization. And so it is rated from -1 to 7, where lower scores indicates greater stability. So both stability position and competitive position are all rated using negative ratings, whilst industry position and financial position are all rated using positive ratings. So industry position seeks to assess the strengths and attractiveness of a given industry within which an organization plies its trade. And some of the key indicators to determine is an organization's industry position include the growth potential of the industry. If we do some sort of forecast, to what extent do we perceive that that given industry will continue to grow? That is one of the indicators. Another indicator is the profit potential of a given industry. So when we invest X amount of money to venture into a given industry, what is the likely profits that can also be retained? Another include the financial stability, resource availability, and so on. So these border on the SPACE metrics. And this is an example to illustrate the various indicators that fall within the 4 quadrants of the SPACE matrix. Those are the ones that I was making reference to, so you can take a look at them later on. If you quite remember, I was saying that at some point in time, the specific indicators that have been identified to be peculiar to an organization will be rated, some of which will be rated between +1 to +7, whilst others will be rated -1 to -7. And as I indicated, it is the financial position and industry position of the organization that gets rated positively, whilst and again, so if you end up having a positive rating, then it will also determine the sort of competition you pursue, whether it should be an aggressive one or it should be a conservative one. Then the competitive position as well as stability position of the organization are also rated negatively, so ranging from -1 to 7. Once you are able to do this computation, just as we did for the internal and external factor evaluation metrics, then you are supposed to find averages for each of the quadrants. So let's say under the financial position, return on investment was 7. Profits motive or the profitization was also 7. Then under that particular quadrant, the average will be 7 + 7 divided by 2, because we have 2 indicators and then we are summing their scores and dividing by the number of indicators. So you do that for all of them. And once you are done, you plot the averages on a Cartesian plane. So when I say a Cartesian plane, it's like the X and Y axis that we are all familiar with. And when you are having X figures, you take it to the, sorry, when you are having negative figures, you take it to the negative quadrant of the Cartesian plane. And when you are having positive figures, you take it to the positive aspects. So typically on the Cartesian plane, the FP and the SP can fall at the apex and at the bottom. And because we indicated that the financial position is positively rated, but stability position is negatively rated, it will have to be located appropriately. We also said that industry position is positively rated, whilst competitive position is negatively rated. So you will have to place them at their right position. Strictly speaking, if you interchange the industry position with financial position, you will still get it right because they are all going to give us positive outcomes. But don't be placing the ones that are rated negative at places where they are supposed to be rated positive. And once these are plotted on the Cartesian plane, it will also help you to know the sort of strategy you will pursue. So if it is falling within the first quadrant of the Cartesian plane, where we have the +4, then it means you have to pursue an aggressive strategy. But if it is falling at the fourth quadrant, which is where we have the -2 + 1 or -5 + 2, then you can pursue a conservative strategy. And what are some of these specific strategies? Okay, so when we say you are pursuing a conservative strategy, some of the options include market penetration, market development, product development, and related diversification, which we all learned last week. Rita, are you sure I scheduled the quiz for 11:30?
Yes, please. It was
Then
11:30
don't
to
worry.
12.
It's supposed to be 12:30 rather than 11:30. So I will change it out. So nobody should go and start the quiz, okay? All right.
Okay, sir.
Now, if you are pursuing an aggressive strategy, then some of the options available include the integration strategies, the market penetration strategies, the product development strategy, and the diversification strategy. Into the varied strategies that fall within the purview of aggression, competitive, defensive have been listed. If you cast your mind back, you realize we've done all these strategies, but we didn't learn the points where a particular information will warrant the use of a particular strategy. So space matrix, depending on the weights that we are getting and the portion of the quadrant where we are plotting them, it will now tell us the sort of strategy that we can pursue. In this day and age, there are available softwares that can be utilized to do the computations and matching whenever we talk about space strategy. So the essence of this class is just to help you appreciate how it will inform a given strategy, whether conservative or aggressive. At the master's level, then it will be important for us to do the calculation. The next tool that we are also going to tackle as far as the matching stage is concerned is the BCG matrix, which is a proprietary matrix. So it was named after the Boston Consulting Group. And just as the space matrix is, it also utilizes a graphical display to make meaning of the information that have been derived during the inputting stage, and also suggest the most appropriate strategy for a given circumstance of an organization. And this means that depending on the quadrant, the inputting, the meaning that is made out of the inputted information is done, then it will also inform the strategy to pursue. So when do we use the BCG? The Boston Consulting Group matrix is usually employed when firms compete in different industries. So if a particular firm has a varied product lines or varied divisions, and each of these divisions is performing different activities and having their own functional structure, then what may work well for division A may not work well for division B. And it is at that point where the Boston Consulting Matrix will help the firm to know the strategies to pursue at one point in time in order to cushion the well-being of other divisions that are also being championed by the organization in question. So which means that you must have multiple divisions or product outlines. And that is why they indicate that it is more appropriate to use it to analyze organizations that have multiple business portfolio units or multiple product lines. And by so doing, you will be able to allocate resources appropriately to priority areas in order to sometimes generate returns that can be pumped into other product lines or business units. Now, the Boston Consulting Group matrix has 4 main quadrants or categories, just like the space matrix, except that the names that are assigned to these quadrants are different. So the first quadrant is called stars. Stars. And the second quadrant is called question marks. Sorry, so the first quadrant is rather question marks, and it moves counterclockwise. And the second quadrant is called stars. The third quadrant is called cash cows, and the fourth quadrant is called dogs. And the labeling of each quadrant mimics the attributes that it is labeled after. So when we say stars, as far as the BCG matrix is concerned, what sort of strategy must be pursued? First of all, the stars as put forth by the BCG matrix suggests that a given organization has higher level of market growth rates, and at the same time, they have relatively high market share. So for the purpose of exams, all you need to know is that the BCG matrix has 2 main dimensions. The first dimension is the relative market share position, which is at the apex here. And the other dimension is the industry share growth rate, which is on our left here. Now, each of these dimensions are rated ranging from low to high. So the relative market share position of an organization is rated from low to high, whilst the industry sales growth rate of an organization is also rated from low to high. Anytime we pair some of these dimensions. So for instance, when we pair high relative market share position with high industry growth rates, then we get stars. When we pair low relative market share position with high industry growth rates, then we get question marks. Now, who can tell me what we will get when we pair high relative market share position and low industry growth rates? What do we get? When we pair high relative market share position and low industry growth rate, what will we get?
A cow. Cash
We
cow.
get dogs.
Cash cow,
Cash
very
cow.
We
good.
get dogs.
And then when we pair low industry growth rates with low market share position, what do we get?
Dogs.
Very good. So for the purpose of exams, you don't need to chew anything in your mind. Try and understand that for the BCG matrix, there are 4 main dimensions: relative market share and industry growth rate. And each of these dimensions fall within a continuum ranging from low to high. And as you pair the low or the highness of one dimension with the low or highness of another dimension, then you get a particular strategy to pursue. So that is all that you need to do. So when we say we are dealing with a situation where there is, we are dealing with stars, the characteristics simply suggest that we are having high growth rates, high market growth rates, being interspersed with high relative market share. And the strategy to pursue there is that when you invest more, the company will continue to grow. So it seeks to represent the organization's best long-term opportunities for growth and profitability. And the typical strategies that can be utilized for having a situation where the fortunes of the company is characterized as stars is that you can pursue all the integrations, so ranging from backward to horizontal. Then you can also pursue market penetration, because the more you invest, the company will continue to grow and you get more profits. You must also engage in a lot of market development activities. And so these market development activities will help you to do more research and understand the given market so that you can channel your efforts appropriately. It is also important to pursue product development strategy, wherein you can innovate and bring more and diversify products into the industry in order to seize an advantage of getting more profits and growth for your establishment. So that is the stars. Now, when the BCG matrix characterizes an organization as currently being a cash cow, the characterization of cash cow is that the company in question is having a lower industry sales growth rate, but a higher relatively market share position. And cash cows are, simply put, business units or products with higher market share in a matured environment, but their growth rates or return on opportunity for growth is rather slow. And so such business units tend to generate more cash than they consume. What that means is that no matter the amount, the returns that the particular business unit or product will be making from the industry is very much high, but the given industry where the company is currently operating in might not have future. And that is why we say it is having lower industry sales growth rates. And when it happens that way, some of the specific options that are available in order to help the cash cow continue to flourish is to use the product development option, diversification option, retrenchment option, and divestiture option. So once you're able to, for instance, embark on divestiture, you will recuperate some returns from the new avenues or the assets that you are offsetting, and that money can be pumped into other viable ventures for the company. And you may also decide to venture into either a related or an unrelated diversification so that other streams of income can be generated. Now, when a business unit is characterized as question marks, what does that mean? It means that such a particular business is experiencing high market growth rate, but low relative markets. Into a interpretation. And the strategy here is to analyze and decide when best to either penetrate into different markets or to develop new products or to become more attractive to new markets or perhaps diversity. So those are the options. And when a particular business unit is characterized as dogs, it means that there is low market growth rates as well as low relative market share. And that is a sign of doom. So the strategic options here is that the company will have to either divest or reposition. So dogs are typically business units or products with low market share and then low growth rates. And these units, irrespective of how much you pump money into it, they will generate low or negative cash flow. So, according to say we sit down, what discussion returns, so it may never come back. And they are said to be having limited prospects for growth. So the recommended strategies here falls within the continuum of retrenchments, divestiture, or liquidation. Now, what the advantages and disadvantages of the BCG matrix are here, which you can consider later on. And they include its simplicity to use, and it's also guiding resource allocation and focusing strategic managers to prioritize on where they can quickly make some decisions for the organization to grow. But the limitation, in fact, the key one is that it is too simplistic. As we've learned thus far, a number of factors come into being to affect the attainment of organizational success, as well as the attainment of competitive advantage, both inside and outside the organization. But they attempt to appreciate these issues and guide the selection of strategies using simplistic assumptions. And they also tend to overemphasize on market share. So those are some of the drawbacks that have been identified, as well as the BCG matrix is concerned. Then the internal-external matrix. Internal-external matrix, which is a measure of the internal factor evaluatory matrix and the external factor evaluatory matrix. So just as it did for the SWOT analysis, this one, it operates on the notion that the outcome of the internal-external factor evaluatory matrix can be analyzed along three major regions. And these three major regions include grow and build region, hold and maintain region, harvest and divest region. So the labels of the various regions also suggest what you are expected to do at that point in time, particularly when you get, you assign weights or ratings to the factors you are generating from the IE matrix, and it is positioning you along some of these regions. So just as the other tools, the IE matrix is also a strategic managerial tool that can be used for organizations to properly understand the varied business units of product lines they may have. And because it is a measure of the internal and external factor evaluatory matrix, an attempt is made to identify the internal strengths and weaknesses, as well as external attractiveness, that is the opportunities that may be coming from the two forms of evaluatory matrices. And so it brings the outcome of internal factor evaluatory matrix and external factor evaluatory matrix together for you to get a better picture of what maintains out there and what maintains inside the organization. Now, it also has key dimensions. It has key dimensions, and these dimensions include the internal factor evaluation dimension and external factor evaluation dimension. And as I indicated, it also includes 3 major regions. And these regions are the grow and build region. So when we say grow and build region, they are the ones that are, in fact, let me use the way to illustrate so that you'll be able to put them into their right perspective. So this is a typical internal external matrix. And I'm saying that it has 2 main dimensions, including the internal factor evaluation total weight scores, as well as the external factor evaluation total weight scores. If you quite remember, when we were doing the internal and external factor evaluation metrics, we were generating some numbers, and I indicated that those numbers can be interpreted to discern the opportunities and threats that are outside, as well as the strengths and weaknesses that are inside. And I said the threshold was 0.25, so that if you are getting something below 0.2, then you are heading towards something that is either a threat or a weakness. But if you are getting something above 0.25, then you are also generating indicators that warrant opportunity or a strength. So when you do the permutations, you will get 9 different quadrants ranging from I to IX. Ranging from I to IX. And when we say a grow or build region, so the first region, including the II, and IV, represents the grow or build region. And it is a region that suggests that the weights that were generated from the internal factor total scores, as well as the external factor total scores, are very much high, medium to high. So if you are generating high scores, then it means you have to pursue a grow or build strategy. And the accompanying strategies for it include the integration strategies, the marketing penetration strategies, to the product development strategies. Now, if you are also found within the region of hold and maintain, the region where you are expected to hold and maintain your posturing, then that means that you are operating at an at a pedestal wherein your scores generated for the internal factor evaluation matrix, as well as that for the external factor evaluatory matrix, is quite low. So typical regions that fall within the continuum of the hold and maintain include the VII, the VI, and the III. And the associated strategies that can help you to either hold your current fortunes or to maintain the current stability, maintain the current state of an organization, is to embark on market penetration and product development so that you can get some other streams of income to stabilize the financial health of the organization. Then when the scores of the evaluatory matrix tend to be low, then we are pursuing the harvest or divest region. And within that region includes the VI, VII, and the IX. And some of the options that are also available here include retrenchment strategy and then divestiture strategy. So this is a typical illustration of the internal-external evaluatory matrix, which try to put together all the information and the scores that were discerned from the internal factor evaluatory matrix as well as the external factor evaluatory matrix by considering the three regions where the scores may cluster. So depending on where it will cluster, it will also inform the sort of decision to embark on. And this is an illustration of a company with diverse divisions, portfolios, and their well-being on the market. So if you look at it carefully, you realize that the division 1, 2, and 3, the division 1, 2, and 3 will fall under the grow and build strategy region. So which means that the various integration strategies as well as the various product development strategies can suffice for them to flourish. But division 4 falls within the region where we label as the harvest or divest. So any form of divestiture or restructuring strategy will also suffice for that particular division. And that is how you can use the IE matrix for an organization that may have varied divisions or varied product lines in order to determine the suitable strategies for each of their division or each of their products. Finally, the Grant matrix. So the Grant matrix also, just as the preceding matrices, strives to permutate and combine two evaluative dimensions, including competitive position and market or industry growth. And the premise of the Grant strategy matrix is that all organizations can be positioned in one of the quadrants, in one of the 4 quadrants of the Grant strategy. And this will also help the organization that have multiple portfolios or products, or if you like, business units, to know which particular strategy will be more appropriate for their products or division. So as I indicated, it has 2 main dimensions, including the competitive position dimension, which is usually on the x-axis of the Cartesian plane, and the market or industry growth rate, which is also usually on the y-axis of the Cartesian plane. So the x and y axis, as I said, the market growth rate is on the y-axis, whilst the competitive position is on the x-axis. And depending on the score you are getting and the quadrant where you are falling, the appropriate quadrant will also suggest the suitable strategy to pursue. So if you are in quadrant 1, firms that are usually, when products or firms or organizations are clustered within the first quadrant, which is the quadrant 1, it suggests that the firm occupies, or that particular product in question occupies an excellent strategic position. And for that reason, the organization can harness all other opportunities that can help it to strive for rapid growth. And these, the recommended strategies ranges from the market development to related diversification strategy. Now, the movement is counterclockwise. So when firms are in this second quadrant, as far as their products or the business units are concerned, it also means that the particular firm needs to evaluate their current approach to the marketplace seriously. And this is so because they are operating in a quadrant where there is a rapid market growth, but a weak competitive position. So this one too, we are just using the vertices to do the interpretation. If you are in quadrant 2, it means you are experiencing rapid market growth, but in an environment that has weak competition. And that means that they need to improve their level of competitiveness to capitalize on market growth. So to enhance their level of competitiveness, recommended strategies include market development, market penetration, horizontal integration, and divestiture. So depending on their peculiar circumstances, some of these options may help them to survive. Then the third quadrant also exhibits the degree to which a given product or business unit of an organization is currently experiencing a weak competitive position and at the same time, a slow market growth. And this means that they will have to reevaluate their strategic directions in order to change their fortunes. So recommended strategies there include retrenchments to liquidation. And finally, when firms are found in the fourth quadrant of the grand matrix, the implication is that the level of competitive position of the organization is very much strong, whilst their market growth rate is also quite slow. And for that reason, the likelihood for the firm to generate steady cash flow is high, but the potential for growth opportunities is also limited. Now, because they are found in a slow market growth environment, even though their competitive position is high. So the cash flow will be good, but potential to harness on growth is very low. So recommended options for the 4 quadrants, as far as the strategies are concerned, include diversification strategies, including both the related and unrelated ones, so that it will help them to enter into other markets that can help them generate different streams of revenue. Then they can also utilize either joint venturing, alliance, to also enhance or enter into other relevant markets. And these are the interpretations for the explanation for all that I was saying. So you can consider later on. The issue of culture, politics, and strategic choice. So all organizations are culture bound, and I'm sure you are all in sync with this claim. It is a universal truism that every organization is bound to have some politics in there and culture in there, just as even in our small nuclear families, we have politics embedded in it. And it is important to note that unless these culture and particularly the politics are managed to the benefit of an organization, political maneuvering may escalate and consume valuable time of members of the organization. And that will subvert the organization's ability to achieve their long-term aspirations. So it will divert their energy and their focus, and the results will not augur well for the well-being or fortunes of the organization. So it is crucial for the choice of strategy we opt into to be considered in sync with the nature of culture and politics that is also embedded in a given organization. So when we say strategies that require fewer culture changes may be more attractive because extensive changes can take considerable time and effort. The relevance is that the pursuit of every strategy is to achieve a cultural fit wherein the strategies will be aligned well with existing organizational culture. And it should also be well accepted so that it can be implemented to its full force. So whenever strategies require significant cultural changes, it may encounter a lot of resistance from employees who are perceived to be the traditionalists or accustomed to the existing norms or ways of doing things. If you are going to introduce or implement a strategy that will involve a total overhaul and a drastic change to the existing one, then the likelihood of you getting a lot of resistance from them is high. And so when you are forging or selecting a strategy, you must be mindful about the degree to which it will fit into the culture of the organization so that it can hit the ground running. Now, once the culture and politics in an organization matches a strategic choice, it can facilitate the implementation of the strategy expeditiously. So the implementation can be done with alacrity or speed. Then that can also go a long way to boost employee morale because there is a minimization in cultural disruption. You are not going to make a lot of changes to existing culture, but rather the strategy that is adopted is something that will fit with the existing culture, of course, after some few modifications. When we also say that political maneuvering consumes valuable time and subverts organizational objectives, diverse energy, and results in loss of valuable employees, what does that mean? The relevance of this particular bullet is that of resource drain. So a lot of political maneuvering within an organization will consume time and resources, consume energy and focus. And that could have been utilized or directed towards other strategic imperatives. So this, when it is not mitigated, can lead to inefficiencies and distractions from core business activities. And that is why it is important for political maneuverings and the political climate to be something that is in sync with the strategic choice. Then when we also say that political biases and personal preferences get unduly embedded in strategic choice decisions, what that means is that we are interested in a situation where the quality of decision on a given strategic choice is something that can stand the test of time, devoid of personal biases, whims and caprices, and individual opinions. So at the end of the day, we are looking for an objective criteria to inform the strategic choice. And when strategic decisions are influenced by political biases or personal preferences rather than an objective analysis, which is informed by hardcore data, particularly from the input stage, then the quality of those decisions can be compromised. And that is not what we are interested in. Then the issue of governance. Why is governance issues very much important when it comes to strategy formulation and strategy selection? Now, it is important because the players that govern and also second formulated strategies to be implemented have a key role to play in the final outcome of the strategic management process. So governance play an important role on the strategic decision-making table, since it ensures that the interests of all various stakeholders and shareholders are protected. And the category of professionals that ensure this governance exercise by holding in check that the stake of shareholders and stakeholders are protected are the board of directors. So board of directors are simply a group of individuals who are elected by owners of a corporation to have an oversight and guidance over the management and who look out for the shareholders and stakeholders' interests. And that means that whenever we are discussing governance issues, it is important for us to also know the relevance of board of directors in this regard. So, although you might have done it in corporate governance and leadership, I'll take you through some of the relevant roles that board of directors play. And the first one is that they exercise an oversight and guidance responsibility. And when we say oversight and guidance, we are simply referring to the degree to which the board of directors will be responsible for the strategic direction of the organization, of the overall organization. And so they ensure that the strategies that are proposed by management align with the long-term objectives that the company intends to achieve. Now, still, as far as their oversight responsibility is concerned, they also deal with the maintenance of accountability by providing oversight exercise over the managers. So they will hold managers accountable for the strategic decision. At the end of the day, managers of a corporation are accountable to some of these board of directors. And when things are not going well, the accountability function of the oversight responsibility will keep them in check. Then you may also talk about risk management as far as their oversight responsibility is concerned. And this is a situation where the board of directors evaluate the risk associated with various strategic options that will be presented to them by management and ensure that the appropriate management practices are also put in place to align with them. Then they also play another important role by looking out for the shareholders. So board of directors are there to make sure that the value of shareholders is maximized. And by maximizing the value of shareholders, we are referring to they have at heart the best interests of shareholders. And that is what those of you doing accounting and management, we call fiduciary duty or fiduciary duty, depending on the phonetics of the secondary school you attended. Then they also have the interests of stakeholders at heart, and this includes the employees, the customers, and the community within which the company resides and operates. And all those will fall within the purview of looking out for either shareholders or stakeholders. Then another function that they also perform is that they are construed to be independent arbiters or judges. So they offer independent judgments. And usually they are, particularly if we are dealing with an independent board of directors. So the board of directors, some of them may be part of the management. So the CEO will be typically construed as an internal person, but we typically have an independent director as part of the board. And such people are there to offer their independent judgments to what some of the internal key players and managers are doing. And so when they offer their views on certain perspectives and strategic decisions, it is construed to be an unbiased verdict that they are passing. And such people are also in there to prevent the realization of conflict of interest. And this is important because sometimes the decision that will be taken by the dependent directors, who may be key managers in the corporation, may be biased because they want it to go their direction or they want it to favor some key players that they are interested in. And so when it comes to issue of reducing conflict of interest or avoiding it, Then their independent board of directors, that is also part of the team, will now come forth and help to mitigate potential conflicts of interest that may arise if management persons were to take or initiate a particular action. Another function of the board of directors is that they ensure compliance. They ensure that the organization complies with best practices. And these best practices ranges from the legal or regulatory requirements that are expected to be adhered to by the organization, as well as any other options which are cutting edge in the community of practice. So they advocate for the adoption of some of these best practices and compliance with the ones so that the organization does not contravene the regulatory and legal frameworks. And the last one is that they exercise a performance monitoring role by periodically evaluating management performance. So management is accountable to board of directors. And these board of directors monitor the performance of the CEO of a corporation, the senior management, and other upper echelon members of the organization. And they also initiate strategic adjustment, particularly when the outcome of their evaluation suggests that the performance of management is drifting away from the standards that the board of directors set for them. So they are able to initiate some control mechanisms so that there is a strategic alignment. And this is a trial question for you to attempt on your own. A trial question for you to attempt on your own.